Okay, so I'm going to continue this tutorial by going through both how I find new literature and new papers on a topic and based off a current paper that I'm looking at. And then I'll also walk you through how to read and summarize a paper so you don't waste all your time bogged down in the details. And then I'll post all these YouTube videos as I record them. So here we are with this paper that we found. This is the first paper we found that I'm showing you, and I'm going to show you how you can go from this and start to kind of look through the literature in different ways. So one thing you can do, I tend to use Google Scholar now instead of PubMed or Web of Science or any tools that we get through the library, because Google Scholar seems to be the most effective and quick to bring up, and seems to have access to lots of PDFs and papers. So I'm often using Google Scholar now instead of any of the library resources. So what we can do in Google Scholar is we can easily search for mobile EEG, and we can start to look at what some of the results are. And so here, non-invasive brain-activated control of a mobile robot. This one says mobile phones change your EEG. Outdoor physical activity with EEG. And so you'll notice that there's lots of different kind of fields of research that study mobile EEG. There's engineering-like papers, like this one, dry non-contact EEG sensor. So they're talking about the development of the technology itself, which I've done some of that research. And then there's kind of applied engineering, where they're working on brain-computer interfaces that you might think of might be also related to medicine. And then there are kind of studies on basic neuroscience of the brain outside in the world. And I think we should focus most on maybe the third one, because that's the topic of this class, is cognitive neuroscience. So we're going to be focusing on kind of cognitive neuroscience articles, but we'll also talk about the engineering side, because we want to test these devices and make sure that they work. So this is one way that you can start to look for papers. And so you can, for instance, click on each of these papers and it'll surf you over to that area. If there are PDFs available, they'll usually show up here. And if you're logged in through the university, then more PDFs will show up. But yeah, you can see right on the right here that you can click and get the PDF right there through Google. This one, again, is more of an engineering style paper. Oops, I close that. So I'll go back to Google Scholar. Okay, so here we are in Google Scholar. Another way that you can search for papers is by looking at papers that cite a given paper. So here we were on mobile EEG, and you can see that this paper that we just clicked on, a mobile EEG system with dry electrodes, or let's look at this one actually, because it's a very classic paper. How about taking a low-cost, small, and wireless EEG system for a walk? This is a paper by a researcher named Stefan Debener, who works in Germany. And he's been one of the leaders of this mobile EEG direction in testing that these devices are working properly. So one thing we could do is, of course, look at this paper, and I'll put this over here beside our other paper so that we can read them both together in a second. You can see that they work. That's a nice short paper, so it's a good one to look at. But what's important is that there's two things. One, we can look at the end of that paper, and we can look at all the research that those researchers cited. These are all papers that were instrumental in these researchers writing the current paper, and so they're important in kind of leading to the current paper. You can read through the discussion and the introduction and read how some of these references are used. Like here, small wireless systems minimize movement of electrode wires. And then they cite this paper, so you can click on that paper and it will bring you to that additional paper. So it's a network, and we want to surf through this network of literature by thinking about the links between papers. And there's two links. There's the papers that gets cited by the researchers that wrote a paper. So these are all kind of studies that precipitated the current paper and led to it. But then there's also something that Google Scholar does very well, is there's a link beside each paper that says that it's cited by 266 papers. So 266 other papers have written about this paper and have cited it in their reference section. This is a good time to show you this star. You can save things in your Google Scholar to read later. But then this button here, Cite, is very useful. If you click on it, you can get an APA-style reference for the current paper that you're looking at. This is something that we didn't have when I was in undergraduate, and is very effective. So you can grab a whole bunch of these references very fast for something like this literature review. Okay, so here we are, and you can click on this Cited by 266 link, and this will show you now a list of every paper that has ever cited that paper. Every paper that's cited, how about taking a low-cost small wireless EEG for a walk? And these are ordered in an interesting way. They're ordered in terms of how many people have cited them. And so the most popular papers are rising to the top of this network. You can see that some of them are by the same authors. Here's Stefan Devener again, talking about a truly mobile EEG system. But then you can see that some of them are by other researchers as well. And so these are very good directions to go as we search through the literature to find new papers. Some of them aren't about mobile EEG, but some of them are. And so you can use this as a sense of direction as you travel through the literature. You can also organize these by date. So you can say, I only want to look at papers that were published in the last year. And you can either only look at a certain year, or you can sort them by when they came out. So you can look at only the newest papers that are coming out, which might be interesting for our class because we can stay at the cutting edge of our literature in that way. Okay, so you can sort by relevance or you can sort by date. Both are effective. And so now we can go and look at, for instance, this other paper here that Olav Krigelson wrote and copy the name and look for it in Google Scholar. And so here it is in Google Scholar. It's been cited by 16 other researchers. So that seems like a manageable amount. And we can go through and look at each of these people that have cited this paper. Some of them are in their thesis of their undergraduate honors thesis, so they aren't maybe as relevant, but some of them are in good journals that have kind of a reputable name. And so you can read about what researchers have done following up on the results that have been reported in these papers. Okay, so now we've come up with a couple ways to find new papers. We can search for different things like EEG during biking, and we can find interesting papers that relate to biking and EEG. Some of them my students have published, so you can add my name and you can look at some of these studies that we've done on bicycles. And what you can also do is you can click on particular researchers who often have a kind of a line of research. So they might do a number of studies on a particular area. You can then sort them by the year, so you can look at, oh, what is the newest studies that lab is doing, right? So we can find Stefan Devener's lab, and we can look at his most recent papers as well and think about if any of these are relevant for mobile EEG. Transparent EEG, that one looks interesting, right? So we can find things based off the researchers, we can find things based off the topics, and like we can search for keywords in Google Scholar, and we can also search. Once we find a paper that's interesting, like this paper of ours that looked at particular types of electrodes, we can look at all the papers that have cited that since. And that's usually a good way of identifying papers in the field that are relevant. So here, for instance, is my student Joanna's paper in which she studied people biking while they were having their EEG recorded. And then it in and of itself has been cited by 4 other people. And so these are kind of important studies that we could look at. Not all of them are about mobile EEG, and so not all of them are relevant for our current literature review. Okay, so now that we've gone through kind of how to identify some papers, you'll notice that there's tons of papers. It's almost overwhelming the amount of literature that there is to sift through. And so what we're going to do next is I'm going to walk you through on the next video, probably the last video, I'm going to walk you through how I go about reading a paper. This one we'll use because it's nice and short and it will work well on the video. And so I'll walk you through how we can go through, and we're not going to read every word. We're going to go through in a really systematic way and go through the paper and try to discern all the relevant and important information and think about whether it's important for our current research project. So I'll see you in the next video.